Hey, Morgan family. Well, there's still so much to research. I feel like that I've just sort of scratched the surface on things, but I thought I need to go ahead and just jump in here and get the first video going. And so I've been working on genealogy for my family for about 40 years, probably a little more than that. And with Donna for 20, I guess, maybe more. Uh, Intensely the last few years, but anyway, with the internet now and the access to documents that used to you had to go to county courthouses and sort of dig through old deed books and records. Now you don't have to do that. That was kind of fun, but it was real time consuming. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a series of shorter videos. If I sat here and tried to do everything at one time, it would be hours long and you'd be bored to tears and I'd be exhausted and you couldn't sit through all of it. And I'm going to try to take one line at a time of the genealogy. Remember, every male has a line and every female has a line for every generation. So it can go on a long time. And I'm going to start with the Morgans. I've got papas and grannies lines to do. I'm going to start with Delvin Morgan, actually with his father, and then we'll come to his mother later. But I'm going to start with Papa's daddy. And today on this video, we're going to focus just on the Morgan line, the male line, and their wives. We're not going to go across the genealogy of all the wives yet. Those will be separate videos because you don't want to just sit for hours and try to wade through stuff. It's too complex. My head's already spinning from what I've been doing this morning. But just to give you an idea of how much information, this is my worksheet chart. And you can see the Morgan line that I'm going to do is up here, and I'm just going to go through those names each generation and tell you some things that I found. But Papa's line is up here, and Granny's line is down here. And then for some of them on the back, it keeps going. This goes back to the 15 and 1600s. And so I can't do all of that in one video. I'm just going to keep doing them a little bit at a time. And a lot of this is online. A lot of it is at wikitree.com. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to put some of the links in the comment section below the video where you can go see the tree. This is not good like being in person, but it's the best we can do with the virus, and looks like the virus is going to be around a while. And we can't get together, it's too hard. But this is all right. We'll just talk a little bit at a time about it, and we can make as many videos as we want. It doesn't matter. You can watch them till you get sick of them and then turn them off and come back and watch a little bit more. And I can make them till I'm sick of it, and I can turn them off and make a little bit more, but I never get sick of it. See, I do this every day. But anyway, I'm going to concentrate on the Morgan line. And I got a few notes to help me kind of guide what I want to say, because you can just keep going forever. But I want to tell you my disclaimer I always say when I'm doing genealogy is you can't ever guarantee that everything's 100% accurate or 100% correct. I usually say that it's about 90% correct. And so I'll guarantee 90%. It's probably more than that. We hope it's 100. But one thing you find out in genealogy is you always run into new information. You get new documents, and you talk to people who are researching the same lines, and you have to tweak things. And I do talk to several people who are doing Morgan research. There's several Morgan lines in the United States. They may be all connected. We don't know that. Some of them may not be. Morgan's a huge, huge family name, and they're Welsh. They come from Wales, from Glamorganshire in southern Wales, a county in southern Wales. And so It's pretty. The DNA, Donna's had her DNA done. Some of you might want to do that. I know some people are scared of it, but you don't need to be scared of it. You say, well, I don't want the government to know about me. Honey, the government knows about you. They can get your DNA in a few seconds if they want it. They can. You touch things all the time. You get in and out of your car. You go shopping. They can. If anybody wanted your DNA, they could swipe it and get it. So forget it. It's not that big a deal. But Donna had her DNA done with 2 of the firms, with 23andMe. Michael did too, and Family Tree DNA. She did hers with that too. I did mine with Ancestry, which I like, and Family Tree DNA, just to kind of coordinate the two. But what that does when you get your DNA checked, it matches you with other people that have had their DNA, and it gives you those matches. And there's lots of Morgan matches. Donna's got over 1,025 cousins that she's matched with on 23andMe, and it tells you how close they are to you. And I'll tell you more about that later. But there's a lot of matches for our Morgan. I say our because I'm married into it, honey. But your Morgan line, there's a lot of DNA matches that are helping us tweak everything and know that we've got the right information. I'm pretty well sure that the Morgan line, our Morgan line, is the group of Morgans that came over in the 1600s to Connecticut and Massachusetts and Connecticut. And they came from Glamorganshire County in southern Wales. Now, let's do this. First of all, I'm going to read to you the names of the people going up the family tree chart. And then I want to tell you some things about them. And some of it y'all might know. The older ones may know these things. And if there's any information that conflicts with what you heard, let's talk about it. And there's lots of documents that I can access that I can't show you on this video. I don't have the technology, but the documents are out there. Some of them are on wikitree.com. Some of them are on ancestry.com. Some of them are on familysearch.com. Some of them are on jenny.com. Some of them are on findagrave.com. But I'm going to tell you the two or three sites, if you want to go looking for stuff that don't cost you anything. Ancestry is a subscription. I have one, but you might not want to pay it. It's $99 for 6 months, but that's my fun money. That's why I have it. Familysearch.org is the free service of Ancestry, and they have a whole lot of stuff on there for free that's on Ancestry.com. Not everything. But familysearch.org, I'm going to put it in the comments. You can find stuff there. Donna's chart's on there. I could send you the link to go right to it if you send me a message on Facebook or email. And then wikitree.com, you have to be careful because people can go on there and edit what you do, and I don't really use it much anymore. But the Morgan tree on Wikitree, if you start with Delvin Lee Morgan, you can hit the ancestor button and it'll show you the tree that I'm going to refer to today. That's free. Findagrave.com is a wonderful site. I've been on it for years, and I work and edit sites there. And Find a Grave is free, and it shows pictures of people's graves. So a lot of your ancestors' graves are on findagrave.com, and some of their pictures, their photographs are on there. If they were after 1850, there was no photography before 1840s. So if there's a photograph on there and somebody died before 1840, it's not real. But anyway, those are some sites I'll put in the comments. And I just want to tell you, things sometimes tweak or change. So we can't guarantee 100%, but this is pretty solid stuff. And I'm going to start with Papa's daddy, because y'all know about your Papa and all about him. And you may know some about George Felix Morgan, his dad. George Felix Morgan was married to Martha Ella Manus, and I'll do a separate video on the Manuses because they just have some amazing people in that family. But so we're going to stick with the Morgans. George Felix Morgan was born in 1889, and I'm looking at my notes, so bear with me. Of course, he was from Georgia. The Morgans lived all over. They moved a lot. They eventually came to Connecticut, to New England. Then they came to Virginia, and one of them died in Virginia. And then they went from Virginia to Tennessee, and they went back and forth from Tennessee to North Carolina, and then they went south into South Carolina for a little while, and then into Georgia. And they moved back and forth between North Georgia and Tennessee. And we're going to find out why in a minute. Some of it had to do with marrying into the Indians, Cherokee Indians, and some of it was they were just going for the land. They were just moving around for the farmland. But George Felix Morgan was born in Georgia, and if you look at the census records, they lived in Whitfield County near Dalton. And let's see, he lived in around the turn of the century, Prater's Mill Camp, it was called, on the Grove Level Road. This was where their home place was. He was born in 1889 to William J.N. Morgan, Will Morgan, and Evie Langford, Martha Evelyn Langford. We're going to talk about them later. He was born there. He's buried at West Hill Cemetery in Dalton, Georgia. West Hill Cemetery. You can go to findagrave.com, look up West Hill Cemetery in Dalton, and you can put in Morgan, and you'll see all the Morgans that are buried. There's a lot of Morgans buried at West Hill Cemetery in Dalton, Georgia. So he was married to Martha Ella Manus. We'll come back to her in another video. George Felix Morgan's father was William J.N. Morgan. I've been trying to find out what the J.N. stands for. I do know that in that Morgan family, you do see the name Newton sometimes. So it may have been Newton, but I don't know that. And I'm guessing the J could have been John Newton. William John Newton, because John appears in the family a lot, but I don't know that. I'm just guessing. Y'all know him as Will Morgan. He was born about 1850, and we do not know yet exactly when he died. I wish somebody knew. And there's some mystery around all of that. He lived, before he went out to Texas, he lived in Georgia, Murray County, Georgia, most of the time, near a place called Shut Pen. If you go Google the name Shut Pen in Georgia on Google Maps, you'll see that region. It's not too far from that Dalton and Whitfield area. And they lived in a place called New Lumpkin, Georgia. He married in 1873 to, let me check something real quick. Oh, excuse me. I hit the table. Hang on just a minute. I'm still checking something here. He married to Melinda. I said Martha. There's a lot of Marthas. Melinda Evelyn Langford. And I'll do the Langford line in another video, which is you got a Civil War ancestor there, Joab Langford. But Will married Melinda Evelyn Langford in 1873. They moved to Texas sometime after 1883. We don't know exactly when, but I know it was after 1883 because their last child, they had about 8 children, and their last child was born in 1883 in Georgia. So they left after that, and Will had about nine brothers and sisters. About half of them went to Texas, and Will and Melinda, I believe they called her Evie Morgan. Will and Evie went to Texas with their children, and about half of Will's brothers and sisters went. You say, well, now, why do you think that happened? Well, it's pretty obvious. The Civil War tore Georgia all to pieces. Sherman burned a lot of it. It was destroyed in battles. There was economic depression because of Reconstruction. It was a hard, hard place to live. And there was opportunity in Texas. And people who had been in the Civil War could get Confederate pensions in Texas when you couldn't get them in Georgia yet. Eventually you could. So they went out to Texas because Texas was paying good pension money. And they all, about 5 families of them Morgan families went out there to Texas, to McLennan County and Waco, and then some of them were a little bit north and west of Dallas, a road between the Waco and the other place where they went. They went out in that area, and they went after 1883. Now, in the 1890s, late 1890s, some of Wheel's brothers and sisters and their children went to Oklahoma, to the Indian Territory, to meet with the government officials who were enrolling people in the what they called the 5 civilized Indian tribes. These were like the Cherokees, the Creeks, the Choctaws, the Seminoles. These were the Indian tribes that they called them the 5 civilized tribes because they had worked some with the American government and not been as hostile. But some of the children of Will Morgan's brothers and sisters went to Oklahoma in about 1895 or 96 to meet with the U.S. government officials from the Indian Affairs. And I found the documents on Ancestry, the testimony, to get enrolled in the Cherokee tribe. And they said that their grandmother and grandfather were both Cherokee, Wesley Morgan and Janice Bryant. Now, let me tell you how it works. We went from George Felix Morgan to William J. N. Morgan, Will Morgan. Will Morgan's daddy was Samuel H. Morgan, who fought the Civil War, and we're going to talk about him in a minute. Samuel Morgan's daddy was Wesley Morgan. So where we are now is George Felix's dad, Will, that died in Texas, married Melinda Langford. His daddy was Samuel Morgan, who married Hannah Nicholson. We're going to talk about her in a minute. And Samuel's daddy was Wesley Morgan, who married Janice Bryant, who was probably a full-blood Cherokee. Wesley Morgan said his daddy, his parents were Cherokees. We don't really know. We know that Wesley Morgan's daddy's name was Gideon Morgan, and that he was married to a woman named Peggy. That's in one of the documents when all of these Morgan people went to Oklahoma to try to get Cherokee citizenship in 1890s. They mentioned in the testimony that their ancestor was Gideon Morgan and he married a woman named Peggy. Well, Peggy was the nickname for Margaret back then. And Gideon Morgan, that married Margaret Sevier, was from Tennessee. Gideon Morgan was the son of Gideon Rufus Morgan, born in 1751, and Patience Cogwell. And they came from Connecticut to Virginia to Tennessee. So we went from George Felix Morgan to Will Morgan to Samuel Morgan to Wesley Morgan to Gideon Morgan to Gideon Rufus Morgan. That's the progression we've made so far. Will's daddy was Samuel, and Will and his 9 brothers and sisters, some of them stayed in Georgia. You can find all their graves on findagrave.com, and some of them went to Texas. I believe one of their brothers and sisters went to Alabama. So there's some Morgan cousins descended from them. Y'all have cousins in Alabama, Georgia, and Texas. Lots of them today. I've been talking to them online. All right, so some of Will's brothers and sisters and nieces and nephews, they go to Oklahoma and they get denied because they say, "We believe you're Cherokee." And they took these witnesses with them from Georgia that said, and Tennessee. They said, "We knew Samuel Morgan. We knew Wesley Morgan. We know they're Indians. They lived as white people, not Indians, but they were Indians. They looked Indian. They could tell you everything about their ancestry," and they were Cherokees, there's no question, but they lived like white people because, number one, you don't want to be discriminated against, and number two, they had more opportunities and they could get by with it, and number three, they just they saw a benefit in supporting America and not fighting America. So they did it, you know. It was just logic. The board listened to all the testimony and all of these documents and testimonies, these old men that testified that they knew Wesley Morgan and they knew Gideon Morgan. They were old in the 1890s. These were men that were born in the early 1800s. So they knew the names and they knew where they were from. They documented how we know who these people are. But the board turned them down because they said there was no name of their ancestor on the Indian rolls. When the Indians were removed from the mountains of the East in North Carolina and Tennessee and Georgia and South Carolina, they were removed to Oklahoma in the Trail of Tears. If you didn't study about that in school, go look up the Trail of Tears. All of them didn't go, of course, but some of them did. And that the government made rolls of all the Indian families. And so these did not go. They stayed in the East, but they did not enroll as Cherokees. They lived as white people, but they could tell you their ancestors' Cherokee names, and the people that lived around them knew they were Cherokee by heritage. But because their ancestors' names, they could not connect on there, they denied them their Cherokee citizenship, and they appealed it. Still denied it, so they didn't get it. So they went on from that meeting in Oklahoma back down to Texas, and 2 or 3 of those, Will died sometime between 1895, 96, and 1905 or 1906. We don't know exactly. What Granny told Donna was that Will froze to death in Texas. I think she told her that he was drinking and he was a little too shot and he froze to death. Now, I can't find any record. Usually if somebody dies like that, and they said it was in Waco, Texas. I can't find any grave with Will Morgan in Waco, Texas, or anywhere thereabouts. I can't find any newspaper article about it. I can't find any obituary. I've talked to Morgan people who are doing the research on the family in Texas, and they do not know anything about Will. Now, so the bottom line is Evie came back east eventually after Will died. She came on back to Georgia, and that's where she died. And we've got a picture of her. We've got, some of y'all have got this picture of, this is Melinda Evelyn. If I can get it up close enough where it'll show. Y'all have got that picture. Some of you have, that's Melinda Evelyn Langford Morgan. That's Will Morgan's wife. She looks a little bit scary there. She had a hard life. I'm amazed she lived as long as she did. And we're going to talk about her family line in another video, but she came back east after Will died, and it was all, if y'all know anything else about it, please tell me. Some of you may have heard something different. I don't know. But she came on back and told that he froze to death. But now there's a bit of a mystery. There are some African American Morgans, black Morgans in Georgia, Mississippi, and Texas that their DNA matches. And they are cousins. And the 23andMe program will tell you where you intersect with those people, how many generations back. And I've been talking to one lady from Atlanta, a black lady. Her name is Shatita Rucker, and she is a Morgan descendant from this Morgan line. There's many of them. She said, I get hits all the time from people, Morgans. And she said, I don't know a lot about my Morgan ancestry, but I know it was a Georgia, Mississippi, and Texas. But the DNA strands go back to about the time of Will or his father Samuel. So Samuel or Will at some point had some black children. And we don't really know which one it is, but Will mysteriously disappears, and Evie shows up in the 1870. I'm sorry, not 1870. She shows up as a widow in 1910. So she told the census taker, "I'm a widow." She came back and told everybody that Will froze to death in Texas, but we can't find any death record. We can't find any grave. Can't find any information on Will. So this is a mystery. We don't know if Will went somewhere else and just disappeared. We don't know if he's the progenitor of that African-American line of Morgans. He could be, but not necessarily. But we're looking. We're all looking. The black Morgans and the white Morgans, we're all delving and digging and trying to find what all was going on there. She's a lovely lady. I've corresponded with her quite a bit. Delightful lady. It could have been Samuel Morgan. Let's move on to the next generation. Will Morgan had 8 children. And so that line could have been through, any of those 8. He had 8 white children. He had 8 children with Melinda Langford. We don't know if he had any with someone else. Will's daddy was Samuel H. Morgan, born in 1815 in Tennessee. He married Hannah Nicholson. I really can't wait to get to the video on the Nicholsons, because there's a guy in there that goes back to the French Huguenots. So hang on that one. And Reverend John Chastain, who was known as 10 Shilling Bell Chastain because he preached so loud and clear that his voice sounded like a 10 shilling bell, they said. And that's on Hannah Nicholson's line. I'll get to that in another video. But Hannah was from North Carolina. And Samuel Morgan was born in 1815 in Tennessee. Samuel and Hannah had 10 children. It's a big family. And they were married in 1837. I believe they married in Georgia. They were living in Georgia. They went to Georgia by that time. Samuel was in the 23rd Regiment of the Tennessee Infantry, called Martin's Infantry in the Confederacy. And he was in Company H. We have his record from the Civil War. Now, there's a little bit of discrepancy among the researchers about Samuel. Some of you have seen his picture. We do have a picture of Samuel. Let me see if I can find it. Here it is. This is Samuel Morgan. Some of you may have seen this. Samuel was enlisted at Knoxville in 1861. You see his hand over his hand. I'll tell you why that's like that, and what that necklace is around his neck. That's a medicine bag. There was something wrong with Samuel. We don't know what year that was made. That's not a typical photograph for a Confederate soldier. They typically, I don't know what that hat is on him, and that medicine bag around his neck, and then his hands like that. He probably injured his hand. A lot of times they would fire these pistols, and the pistols would misfire and blow part of their hand off, and that could have happened. But he's hiding that hand, which is not typical, and he has no weapons on him, and we can't tell what that is on his lap. He was injured. Now, one researcher that really has done more work on the Morgan line than anybody I know says he thinks that that's a POW photograph, that Samuel was in the POW camp and that picture was made. And I can't verify that, but it's what he thinks. Something was wrong with Samuel. Most researchers think he died in December of 1861 in Knoxville in the camp. And that makes sense. His own daughter, in her testimony before the Indian Board in 1896, she said, my daddy was Samuel Morgan, told the regiment he was in, told where they lived in Tennessee. And she said he died in 1861 at the age of, I think she said 45. So she verified. Some people believed that he went on with that company to Virginia because that's where his company eventually went. And they think he died in battle in 1864 and was buried in Virginia. So there's a little bit of argumentation about that, but he never came home. He never did come home. And Hannah was listed by 1870 as a widow in the census. So in Blairsville, Georgia. So she had 10 children, and most of them were at home when Samuel died. And half of those, as I told you, went out to Texas after the war. But Samuel dies, and there's no other record of Samuel. Now, one researcher I talked to thinks that Samuel may have run away and just disappeared, and that Hannah said that he died. So he may not have. One researcher told me, he said, I think he didn't want to take an oath of allegiance to the United States. And he said a lot of Confederate veterans who didn't want to take the oath of allegiance, they just ran away and started new lives, and some of them went out west. And he thinks that Samuel went out west, and that may be the progeny of the Black Morgans. It could be. We don't know. But somehow the African-American line of Morgans is there, and DNA proves they're cousins. So it's either through Will, who dies mysteriously and we don't really know what happened, or it's through Samuel, who died. And if he died in camp, there would have been a record of that, or they'd have shipped the body back or something. So we don't really know what happened to Will or his daddy, Sam. Sam dies. Hannah Nicholson comes back to Georgia, and we're going to talk about her in another video. And Sam's dad was Wesley Morgan, who was born about 1792 in South Carolina. And we don't know when he died. Some people think he died about the close of the Civil War, about 1865. He was married to Janice Bryant. Now, we have a picture that people say is Wesley Morgan and Janice Bryant, and some of you may have seen that, but I don't know if it's them or not. Let me see if I can bring it up. It just disappeared. There it is. Some of you, if I can get it where it'll show, some of you have seen this. This is claimed to be Samuel Morgan, Wesley Morgan, the father of Samuel, and his mother, Janice Bryant, who is obviously Indian. The Bryant family, Janice's family, were probably Cherokee Indians, because she may be the daughter of John Bryant. It's hard to get birth records for Cherokee Indians back that far. She would have been born about 1790 something as well. There's no written records of that, but there was a John Bryant who was a chief in the Cherokee tribe in the western part of North Carolina and eastern Tennessee. And he had a Cherokee name. I've got it written down somewhere. I don't remember it. But she may be the daughter of John Bryant, because it's hard. We can't find any records on Janice. And so there's another Cherokee link. Wesley claimed he was a quarter Cherokee himself. And so we believe Wesley's dad was Gideon Morgan Jr. Hold on just a minute and let me get another paper. Wesley Morgan, we don't know anything about him. Gideon Morgan Jr. Was born about 1776 or 1778, and he died in, I believe it says 1851. He married Mary Margaret Morgan Sevier. or Mary Margaret Sevier. She became Mary Margaret Morgan. They knew her as Peggy because Peggy is a nickname for Margaret. And someone testified before the Indian Board that they knew Gideon Morgan and Peggy Morgan. Peggy's father was Joseph Sevier, and her mother was Betsy Walker. She had been a Lowry. They were Cherokee Indians. Betsy's half-brother was chief of the Cherokee tribe for a while in the Eastern Band. Her mother was Nanny Lowry, and Nanny Lowry's mother was an Indian woman named Gigoneyu. That's the only names there. She didn't Anglicanize her name. Most of the time when these Cherokee Indians married European men, they Anglicanized their names. So we're up to Wesley Morgan, and his father was Gideon Morgan, Colonel Gideon Morgan, born in 1778. His father was Corporal Gideon Morgan, born in 1751, and he's the one that left Connecticut. And during the war, they moved. The whole family moved. They came Connecticut to Virginia, and his wife was Patience Cogswell. Patience died in Stanton, Virginia. She's buried there in Stanton. Her grave is on findagrave.com. It's Patience Cogswell Morgan. Gideon Morgan moved on with his children and remarried, and then came to Eastern Tennessee. He's buried in Kinston, Tennessee. He died in, let me see if I can see, about 1830. I think his will is on record in Tennessee. This Morgan line keeps going. Corporal Gideon Morgan's father was Samuel Gideon Morgan. His father was James Morgan. And it keeps going and going and going. If you go on WikiTree, back to the early 1600s in Connecticut and Massachusetts. Morgan family, that's just the Morgan line. And it's 37 minutes. I'm going to go through the names one more time. Eventually, I will post the link, so if you want to go look at the charts. The Morgan family has been here for almost 400 years. I do have to tell you this one thing about Gideon Morgan, Gideon Rufus Morgan, and his wife, Patience Cogswell. He did a lot of things. He was a surveyor. He was a tavern keeper. He was a farmer. Gideon Rufus Morgan went to New York for a few years and surveyed the town of Saratoga, New York. He helped found the town of Saratoga, New York, your ancestor. He had a tavern, and when General Washington came through during the Revolutionary War with the French General Rochambeau, they stayed at Gideon Morgan's tavern. Google it. You'll find it. His wife, Patience, waited on General Washington. President George Washington made note that he stayed at Gideon Morgan's tavern, and Mrs. Morgan fed him and took care of him. Not long after that, Gideon and Patience had their last, I believe it was their last, might have been next, no, probably he was in the middle. They had their next child after Washington had stayed in their tavern. You know what they named him? George Washington Morgan, because the general had stayed in their tavern. Well, he didn't keep the tavern long, and he left New York. Then they came down through Virginia, and then they came to Tennessee. And so they moved around, and after the war, he settled and farmed and lived to a pretty good old age for back then. So it's just wonderful things. And I hadn't hit it all. I've hit the highlights, but I need to end this because we're at 40 minutes and it's too long. But I'm going to come back next time. And if I look at this and think, oh my, I left something out, I'll come back and add it again. Donna may look at it and say, why didn't you tell them about so-and-so? But I can't retain it all. It's too much. So we'll come back next time, and we're going to pick up maybe with one of the women's lines, either Hannah Nicholson or Martha Manus. And I hope y'all were able to stay with me. I hope I didn't ramble too much. And we'll, if you have other information that I didn't have and you're watching this, please type it in the comments below or send it to me on Facebook, and I'll make another video. Y'all listen, thank you for watching. I hope I didn't confuse you too bad. And I'm proud to be married into this family. And we'll be talking to y'all later. Y'all have a good one and stay safe, and put your mask on when you go out, and don't congregate around people you don't know, and don't congregate around people you do know, because they might be carrying a virus. I want y'all to stay healthy and safe. So play it safe till we get a vaccine or it goes away. I love y'all. Bye.